Slide 1. Perhaps my experiences in Canada as a Spanish language teacher piqued my interest in repeated readings for my dissertation some years later. This notion of building fluency in motivational ways has never left me. I am intrigued by this idea that drill and practice can, in fact, be fun. My students and I called the dissertation a speed reading program. You can decide for yourself what you think. Slide 2. There's ample evidence available that fluency of decoding, reading aloud, increases progressively across the grades. At the end of grade 1, a typical child is reading 75 words per minute on grade 1 reading materials. At the end of grade 2, that same child is reading 100 words per minute on grade 2 reading materials. At the end of grade 3, it's 124 words a minute, and so forth. The question is, in my mind, is it worth targeting fluency as an instructional goal, or is fluency just a natural outcome of becoming a better reader? Slide 3. I arrived in Kentucky in 1978 and soon thereafter was exposed to 2 remedial reading strategies that appealed to me. One was the method of repeated readings, and the other was called reading while listening. I'll try to explain both as I came to understand them. Slide 4. Jay Samuels, a professor at the University of Minnesota, published an article in 1979 entitled The Method of Repeated Readings. The article was very appealing to me. I understood the article and I found it intriguing. The article is attached on my website. Just look below. Slide 5. Here are 3 quotations from the Samuels article. I could relate to all 3 of them. The notion of rereading. In Spanish, we used to rehearse. The idea of using a stopwatch to set measurable goals. And the idea, certainly, of using a tape recorder with headphones in order to provide fluent models. It all made sense to me. Slide 6. This slide depicts the kind of data that Professor Samuels published in his article. Incredibly simple. In this example, he's measuring words per minute across a series of 1-minute probes. It's 5 different passages, so you see 5 different clusters of data. The first passage, the child started reading on his first probe at 30 words per minute. It required 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 practice sessions before the child reached 85 words a minute. On the second passage, the child started on his first measure at 50 words a minute, and it required 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 practice sessions to reach, almost 90 words a minute, and so forth across this graph. The suggestion being that not only can children become fluent on passages, but that with each successive passage, fluency is generalizing. The child is starting at a higher rate, and in some cases, it's requiring less practice to attain the criterion. That was interesting to me. I was also introduced to Marie Carbo, reading while listening. Marie Carbo pushed the notion that teachers should record storybooks so that their students could use headphones and listen and read along. Not just listen. Hear me on this. It's read while listening. So the child sits at a table, listens, and reads orally with the tape while underlining the words with a finger. Again, it appealed to me. Marie Carbo expressed the argument that children should be exposed to high-interest, low-readability book collections. That the idea of using quality children's literature, as it's called, might not be appropriate for the actual reading practice time. That there are certain very real advantages to using, for want of a better word, trade books or pulp fiction. Slide 9. Her argument was that these high-interest, low-readability books are deliberately and consciously written, published to support struggling readers. The format is supportive, the storyline is compelling, the plot is very simple and straightforward, and the sentence structures are kept very simple. Slide 10. Just as I had purchased a tape recorder to teach Spanish, 10 years later I purchased my first Sony Walkman to promote reading while listening. Slide 11. This is a sample of one of the high-interest, low-level reading passages. I would record these passages myself at a rate of 100 words per minute to provide the student with a model to listen to. If you look at the illustration of the child on the top right, the child is sitting at a table, listening to the recording, underlining the words while listening, and perhaps after the second or third rehearsal, the child is being asked to actually read aloud with the recording. Here is a sample of 100 words per minute. Summer began for us on the night we were graduated from high school. Both of our families were there, feeling proud and happy. I still don't know why I felt so mixed up on the one evening when everyone was expecting me to be carefree and happy. If you'll notice, at that reading rate, I am still doing my very best to maintain the prosody of our language, the musicality of our language. I'm certainly not reading word by word. In the story books that my students selected, we did word counts in the margins, just as you see here, so that it would be easy to take the 1-minute probes after practice and compute reading rates. A little more about that in a moment. For this slide, suffice it to say that the student would put on earphones and for 10 minutes would listen and re-listen to a passage. Most of the passages were 300 or 400 words long, 2 or 3 pages long. So during a 10-minute practice, a student would be able to rehearse the story 2 or 3 times. At the end of the 10-minute practice, the headphones come off and the child is asked to read for 1 minute beginning at some random point in the passage in order to measure fluency. That measure is then charted, as you see in the small chart on the right-hand side of this slide. Slide 12. This slide attempts to reiterate what I just expressed. First, the child practices, and in my case, students practiced for 10 minutes with the headphones on, reading with the tape. Then we did a 1-minute probe, which I here call measure, and then we would chart. The child would then have another 10-minute practice. We would take one more probe and chart. So we were adding 2 data points per session. Slide 13. I asked to work with the lowest, slowest 5 readers in a middle school in Bowling Green, Kentucky. The kids were 12 and 13 years of age. They were all males. 2 were African Americans and 3 were Caucasians. Each student met individually with me for half an hour a day, and this spanned more than 2 months of time. Every student picked his own favorite book. We had lots of choices, and the goal was to complete a book, chapter by chapter. Slide 14. This is a sample graph. It was true for 4 of my 5 students. For one student, I'm not sure that repeated readings were productive. But for 4 out of the 5 students, the pattern was very similar to what had been reported by Jay Samuels. I have Professor Samuels' data in miniature on the right-hand side. In this example, the students are exposed to one passage at a time, so it's passage 1, passage 2, passage 3, and passage 4. They practice for 10 minutes, then the probe is collected, and that probe is what is charted. So for passage 1, we see how many data points? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 data points. That represents 60 minutes of practice in order to reach fluency of over 100 words a minute. Okay, notice for passage 2, which is the same length, it's just the next passage in the chapter, the child only had to practice for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 data points, so 50 minutes of practice on slide 2, and so forth. My conclusions were that fluency generalized and that repeated readings were motivational. The students stuck with me over a period of many weeks and remained very positive about this speed reading project. Slide 15, here are 2 of my students, James and Ricky, and on this web page you can hear them reading if you choose. I have those videos uploaded. Slide 16, Ricky is underlining every word as he reads it. That's important. It's one of the aspects of repeated reading that Marie Carbo so emphasized. And here, slide 17, Ricky held up the book at the end of this videotaping and expressed his sincere belief, this is a good book. I appreciated teaching all of these young men, and I came to respect the method of repeated readings.
This is a good book.